crazy,
Hold
but
up,
it's
hold up,
all
hold up. Are
in-house
you for
data.
real?
Everything
You're
else
calling
is
me out?
context.
You're calling me out because I just posted our fast times
No,
today.
no, go rip it. Like, go do your thing. But I haven't even seen that, to be honest. Welcome back to the Staff Meeting Podcast, hosted by George Adams, myself, and Dan Mullins. This week, we tackle the question of context, whether that's context in coaching philosophy, whether that's context on social media behind drills, whether that's the data question, in-house versus external. Context is everything in coaching, and we need to understand that more. That way we can be in each other's corner and actually push the field forward. Dan also jumps into some stuff he's been working on with acceleration with some of his athletes this week and some testing he's been doing. So that's going to be first right here off the bat. So excited to get back into episode 2. This is going to be another George and Dan rant episode, and let us get into it. You know, kind of just trying to still establish like who we are to y'all, why you should listen to two dudes from Mississippi and Georgia on training, and communicate on stuff we're going to communicate on anyway. So hopefully we can get something out of it. But before we get into today's episode, Dan, we were just talking off air a little bit about some ideas you've been having and some things you've seen this week through testing. So something about acceleration testing and kind of how you've built that in this week.
Yeah, so my setup working with middle schoolers is very different than the vast majority of middle school. So I have 2 periods of 8th graders, 2 periods of 7th graders, 2 periods of 6th graders. And I have them 5 days a week for like 45 minutes a day. So I've got a lot of time with them. So they're kind of like my little lab rats and little things that I can test and try to figure out like how does strength training from kind of a conceptual perspective apply to these really young athletes with everything from 0 training age to a training age of like 1.5 and 2 for some of them, which is actually pretty good. So like we've got some kids from a relative strength perspective that are really strong and mature. I've got a kid that can front squat like 1.7 times his body weight. He can jump 37 inches on just jump. Like I know there's some inflation there, all that good stuff.
Love that.
But still counts. So, and run some crazy speeds. And he's been targeted already. He's an 8th grader. He's been targeted for some high level opportunities with football as a receiver. He plays basketball. He runs track, all those things. So he's a really, really good kid, but we've got some constraints and some things because of that time that allow me to test some things. So one of the things that I was getting into this week, I was reading some articles about potentiation and the need for potentiation in training. And it started off down a rabbit hole of, all right, well, how can we use potentiation as a vehicle to artificially kind of inflate PRs? And what I mean by that is like the mental game behind performance. So Ronnie Jankovic and I have had this conversation, like if on days where they have big games coming up, on Thursday, he'll manipulate where he puts his lasers. Like they run fly 10s on every Thursday. So if they're running a 30-yard lead fly 10, he'll put the start laser on the back side of the 30-yard line and then the stop laser on the front side of the 40. So really it's like a 4-inch difference between a regular fly 10, and he'll have them run it, but doesn't tell them the difference. He doesn't end up recording the times, but almost everybody is going to PR, especially those skill kids, simply because of how you manipulated the times. So like he's thinking, hey, now we're going into a big game. We've got this mental edge. We're feeling really good. Well, I got that thought of, okay, well, what does that look like if we use that from a potentiation perspective? So that's what led me down this rabbit hole. And it started off with just vertical jump. So Monday we hit vertical jump cold. Like we just went through a regular warm up and then hit vertical jump. Then Tuesday we went through a warm up. We did some dumbbell goblet squats, and then we hit a squat, like pin drive ISO for 5 to 7 seconds is all I asked them for. Then they put the bar down, they rested for 30 seconds, and then they came over and hit their jump. Well, when I compared Monday's jump to Tuesday's jump, on average, it was about 53% better performance for the whole class. So the boys averaged 0.7 inches higher. The girls averaged actually 0.9 inches higher. So big difference there. But we had, when I compared Monday to Tuesday, it was much better jumps on Tuesday potentiated. And my thought process was like, these kids are going to be way too underdeveloped for potentiation to matter, right? Like you're dealing with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids that aren't physically developed. Like there's no way potentiation is going to have that big of an effect. But then when I looked at it and I sat back and thought, I was like, well, it actually makes more sense for them, for it to be a bigger impact for them, because their brain, the potentiation factors, their brain is turning those muscles on. It's telling those muscles, hey, we need to get ready to work. And then, hey, let's perform. Then went into it Friday, or went into it today, and we always run fly 10s on Friday. We call it Fast Friday, and we did the same thing. We potentiated. We did a working set of front squats and split squats. Then we went and sprinted 2 reps, and then we came back into the weight room, and I had 93% of our kids PR today. So to me,
That's huge.
That potentiation factor was huge for us. So I think there's definitely something there within like that short ACL window, because we were running 10-yard fly 10s today. And then next week we'll run it again with 5 yards. But I think especially with younger kids, the ability to potentiate and then roll into acceleration is going to be really, really important, because now you're unlocking the brain's ability and learning how to push, almost like learning what it should feel like when acceleration and those mechanics are working the way they should be.
Yeah, like how to actually press through the ground, generate force, and get through. And your brain's got to be awake to do that. They can't nobody's going to go out cold and pop a good XL time, because unless they're just a genetic freak.
Yeah.
And it's not like turn it on, turn it off like that.
Even on our regular days, it's not like we weren't warming up. We still go through like our normal speed warm-ups. We're still getting like the build-up reps. We're still doing all the things that you quote unquote should do before we time a sprint. But the difference was that extra strength training set this week. We allowed them to almost prime their muscles, whether you call it post-exercise potentiation or post-activation potentiation, depending on the model of how you're using it. Like Tuesday, we did the actual ISO, which would be like the activation. And then today we did the post-exercise potentiation, whatever. I think it really is helping our kids know, like, this is what performance should feel like in that brain connection to their performance.
Yeah. And like you said I like what you said about Ronnie. Like there is, and that kind of leads us into the topic, right? Is like context is everything. It's like when we're testing and we're saying, hey, let's go get a PR, that there are standards that are going to be held there when we are getting a test set. But when we are trying to manipulate those variables and like, let's go stretch a little bit. Like this may not be a PR because this isn't our standard protocol of the way we're going to handle things. Like, yeah, we're getting a different training aspect there because we're more woke up mentally, but we can't, it's like the context of it, right? I don't think you would have a kid pop some crazy XL day and then you're like, nope, new PR, but next time it's not going to be the same because we didn't do all that potentiation beforehand.
And I definitely, like, I've done, and I've manipulated similar to Ronnie. I've manipulated our splits before. And the thing I like, and kind of like shameless plug to Claros here, as I'm rolling through the testing center, I can type everything in. It tells me when they PR'd and still display that live leaderboard. But at the end, once I disconnect my tablet from the display and they can't see the leaderboard anymore, if I've manipulated it, I press cancel. And it doesn't save it. So it's not the end of the world. It's not like it's messing up our numbers or our true PR numbers or anything like that. But I can still give them that instant dopamine hit of, oh, I'm flying today.
Yeah. I was having this talk with somebody else earlier today, is like, that is what's important. You know, it's important, like in-house, inside of our own programs, we have to understand what the PR is, what the day for the PR is, what our testing protocols are. But then there's days where kids are going to rip it because now we've built in these performance circuits per se. And like, we are trying to raise that ceiling of what they're capable of. But this isn't a true day, true normal.
I was talking to a coach about this the other day. We have to, when we look at performance, especially when we're evaluating things like jumps and sprints, we have to be able to look at our programming and align. So he was frustrated because their numbers, like for their jumps and sprints, seem to peak in October and November. And he was talking about non-football sports, so they weren't in season or anything like that. And I said, well, how are you programming their reps? And because they go based off VBT. He's like, well, we were ripping sets of 6 and 8 and this and that and the other. And I'm like, well, yeah, when you're training a certain type of way, like, and when your volume naturally goes up, typically your performance is going to go down a little bit. It's going to take a hit. So even when we're evaluating like what is success or how are we trending, we have to think of it in light of the context
Yeah.
of everything that's going on. Is the athlete in season?
Hmm.
Are we rolling through? Have we changed our programming? Am I collecting our data inside of a performance circuit, or am I collecting it before and after a workout, 5 and
Right.
3 and 2, or are we doing sets of 8? Because all of those things matter that go into how an athlete's going to perform when we're testing this stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, it is I think that's the important part that, often gets missed, especially with sport coaches. We're running flies right now with football, and like we're just not fast, but we are also in a phase where they shouldn't be very fast right now. I don't need them to be very fast right now. If they are, that's awesome. But I'm not necessarily being like, hey, we need to be as fast as possible in January, whatever it is, 23rd.
Yeah.
That doesn't win me games in November.
I was talking actually shoot, this time last year, when I was still training like heavily in the high school or like the varsity football setting, this
Hmm.
time of year, like, and it was on one of my motivational slides. Like this time of year, you're not supposed to feel good. Like our goal isn't for you to always feel like
Hmm.
you can go jump 40 inches and run a 21 mile an hour or any of that stuff. Like we have to be able to build you, like, and focus on certain
Hmm.
qualities. Like we're always going to have, and this was one of my posts the other day, we're always going to have like a concurrent training model. There's never going to be times where we like completely eliminate the most important things. We're always going
Hmm.
to do that because those qualities are important for performance. But we're also going to
Hmm.
shift and focus on things where maybe we need to focus on body recomp, or maybe we need to gain weight. So you're not
Yeah.
like, I'm going to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of our fly tens and our jump times to put that weight we need on you. So again, back to that
Yeah.
context, like what are the goals of this training block? My goals aren't for you to get faster
Hmm.
and for you to jump higher right now. My goal is for you to gain 20
Right.
pounds so that you can handle a season.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a something that, especially in the social media world, right, that gets missed is context. Because you're training in a facility, even like if we take our middle schoolers, right? Because that's where the majority of your like in weight room training happens right now. And my middle schoolers, they're two very different kids. We have two very different facilities. We have two very different coaching staffs. We have similar ideas on how we need to approach training, but we're not, me and you, because we are different people, are always going to be aligned a little bit differently. But context has to rule everything. And so many people want to post these fast flies or these crazy squat numbers or these crazy,
Hold
but
up,
it's
hold up,
all
hold
in
up. Are
house
you for
data.
real?
Everything
You're
else
calling
is
me out?
context.
You're calling me out because I just posted our fast times
No,
today.
no, go rip it. Like go do your thing. But I haven't even seen that, to be honest. But it's it gets inflated because I think both of us care about what we do enough to where, yeah, let's post our fast times. I love posting my fast times. I posted a kid yesterday smashing a clean, like sick. But especially in the speed world, right? It's easy to manipulate what gets posted. Me and you have both seen videos where people are like, "Oh, this is a 40-yard dash, and he ran a 4.2." And it's like, there's no lines. How'd you know it was 40 yards? Like you just like stepped it off like old school
Yeah.
rec football.
My favorite thing to
It's
do
stuff
with
like that.
those
Like me and
is,
you care.
yeah, my favorite thing to do with those is I'll screen record it, and then I'll use the trim tool on my phone to like, oh, when was yard one, and then where was yard 40, and then see what the
Mhm.
actual play time is.
Yeah.
Those are fun. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
even what you're saying goes into it. Like I noticed too, I might be feeling really good right now because of the potentiation stuff. And like, I have to check myself even within what I'm doing and the number of PRs that we hit today, because our kids have never really done this, especially those middle school kids. They've never sprinted weekly. They've never
Yeah.
jumped 2 and 3 times a week.
Hmm.
So like just doing the skill, just
Hmm.
doing the task is going to get them better. Not necessarily like, it doesn't mean I'm a good strength coach
Yeah.
because our numbers are improving, because they're just doing the task. It's like shooting free throws. The more you shoot free throws, the better
Hmm.
you're going to get at free throws. Well, our broad jump, our vertical, and our
And there.
sprint is our free throw.
Yeah, and there's that skill associated with especially young kids, right? Or kids new to training or new to your program. When you have somebody come in that's has been trained somewhere else, and then they move into your program where you do stuff a little bit differently. Like they get those gains pretty quick, and it's fun, but it's just because the stimuli changed. It's not necessarily like true adaptation yet.
It's like all those people going to the Diamond Gym right now and their deadlift is going up.
Yeah. It's like, well, you did 7,000 reps of a deadlift today. Like, yeah, it should,
And you've
you
never
know?
deadlifted before.
Yeah. You come in like, it's the only time I think you can do stupid amount of volume, and you haven't had dudes just jacked up yelling at you, telling you you're all sorts of things if you don't pick the bar up either.
Yeah.
So
It's like those guys that like they were athletes in high school, and then when they get to college, they decide to go party for a little while, take a couple years off, and then come back to the gym and they get those newbie gains. And it's like you like hit the
Yeah.
everything fresh again, and like everything shoots up.
that's where fitness influencers come in. So they get those gains back and like, oh, here we go. Like
Yeah.
now I'm gonna start a fitness journey. And so all right, so getting back on like our track for today, like context, right? Like, and that's kind of what we want to hammer in on, is the context. And you said a couple things like with your middle school kids. And so let's frame it right now in data. Let's go there. Let's go with data because me and you both love some numbers. Let's go to how do we create context inside of our own programs, and how do we make sure that those test days versus performance days are two different things, or training days and test days, or how do we make sure that we're not influencing our own numbers trying to inflate our own worth as a coach?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with understanding that, and even communicating with your kids. There's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. I mean, there's going to be stretches where like you're not feeling good or you're not hitting good numbers for extended periods of time, or you're not PRing week over week over week. Well, that's because things as simple as like body weight changes impact, especially jumps and sprints.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And middle school kids, especially, and even like freshmen in high school, like the ways that their body changes when they're first getting into those programs, your numbers are going to be all over the place. So for me, we're pretty intentional about how we talk about these things. I communicate to them like, hey, we're going to rip PRs and we're going to see those. If you see one PR a month in each of our things, it's really good. If you see one PR really in 3 months, it's going to be really good for us. Because the most important thing for us is that we want to be training at 90 to 95%. Like if we're habitually testing and you're hitting 95% of your PR, and we're training for us, we train 5 days a week. Like over time, you're going to get really, really good as long as you keep practicing your sport and practicing whatever you do. So being intentional about like defining what good is. Good isn't a PR. A PR is great, but training at 95% habitually of whatever your PR is, that's the goal and that's the target for us.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Those conversations to have with kids so that they understand what we're talking about. Because social media have you believe, or Twitter or whatever, right? There's 4.4s floating out on everybody's bio that plays football, but that doesn't mean everybody runs a 4.4. Can they get this in their head that they have to go and, man, if I'm not running a 4.4, I'm not getting recruited. It runs in their head. So the more conversations we can have with kids and define what that context is, now they can start to understand our thought process behind training.
And there's so much of it too, like that goes into those same things. You don't have to have elite numbers and testing measurables to be an elite player. Like, sure, there's going to be some qualities you have to have, but everybody has inevitably those kids that are like middle of the pack when it comes to their quote unquote performance numbers, but then goes out there on the basketball court and averages 20 points a game, or averages like, 100 yards rushing, because they're just like, they're ballers and they play well when the lights come on. That's part of it. And I think that goes to some of what like Tony Villani talks about when he's talking about game speed and being able to create one step of separation and being able to tactically know how to go in and out of cuts, or have those and where we focus our time even to be able to build acceleration. And that's why, like, I was having this conversation with Stikowski the other day. Like, speed is important, and we're always going to want to chase and improve our speed. But where we allocate our time to where what impacts the game is what really is going to make the difference when it comes to building a culture and building
There
a
you go.
team. And that's where acceleration, in my mind, acceleration and game speed qualities matter the most. So we can train all of these things, but inevitably we're going to have kids that suck when it comes to performance and suck at the weight room, but are just really good players.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to win games. And I don't, as a coach, you should. I don't know. I think that's fairly important as much as strength coaches, performance coaches shouldn't get judged purely on wins and losses because there's a lot, again, a lot of context difference there. But if we are filling buckets, if we're doing the Excel stuff, the game speed, change of direction, agility, the stuff that actually transfers to a field, like we're doing our job at that point. You know, I'm in a space where that is my job. I'm the performance coach. I don't have to coach football. I don't coach a position. So like that is where, film time for football coaches, that's where I'm looking at, hey, what do the numbers look like? I'm also watching film, but I'm not watching it from a schematic standpoint. I'm watching it from a how are we moving standpoint. And that way I can give context to our training.
Yeah. And I think those are really important qualities that us as strength coaches that we can provide. And I know mine's different because I am a football coach and a position coach too. But one other piece to like the framing of context within data specifically, since that's what we're talking about, is that every team that we have is different. So instead of continuing to fit like what is a square peg into a round hole, might be the other way around, I don't know. But
Yeah.
instead of just like,
Either
hey,
way, they don't fit.
this is how we train and this is what we do and this is what our scheme looks like. If 3 years down the road, our team might not fit that. We may be more of a skill-based team, or we may have shifted to more of an O-line, D-line driven team because of what our players are. So us as coaches being able to understand that and implement that context into how we coach and how we scheme things up is extremely important too. And as strength coaches, we got to be able to feed that to the coaches because a lot of the times, especially in the off season, the coordinators aren't in the weight room very much. Or the people that make the scheme aren't really in the weight room as much as we are. They don't get to see them as much until they come out for spring
they're not
ball.
the drivers. Yeah. Yeah. They're not the drivers anymore like us as the strength coaches are. But what you said too with scheme is important. I mean, for you, I know, for those that don't, like our offense, I want to snap the ball as many freaking times as possible. And I want to run as fast as possible. Like we play a game that is up tempo. But if I was training, I love that style of training too. So that, I mean, it meshes up super, super well. But if I was training a team that was running veer all the time and we're taking 30 seconds off the clock every time we get under center, that training should probably look different. It doesn't matter like if the speed training at that point, like, yeah, we can be a lot more linear. There's not as much happening in space. There's not as much happening. We're not running wide zone and just stretching that thing all the way to the other number, right? We're freaking, hey, 4 yards, a cloud of dust. Y'all better wake up because we're about to punch you in the mouth and we're going to do it, 50 times in a game. But like in what we do, like I'm trying to snap the ball 70 times in a game. And that's a huge difference. And it's a completely different training model.
Yeah, and there's even ways within that go into how you prepare, whether we're talking like weight room, we're talking conditioning, we're talking even your speed work. There's different considerations that you guys have to have, right? I love smash mouth football, but at the end of the day, if we don't have the kids to play that style of football, we got to make the scheme fit the kids that we have in front of us. So I, as a strength coach, now when we put that hat on, I have to match that to our scheme to how we prepare. So we have to be able to use all of these things to fit our time and fit all of our constraints and the frameworks that we, in the context that we operate in. Us as strength coaches have to be able to be versatile enough to do that.
Because we have to fill that gap with the kids. We have to be able to fill, hey, this is what we do. This is the way we train, but we have to understand the why that we're doing this. Because like you said, football coaches don't understand necessarily all the time. And it's not a bad thing. It's just not what they do. Is like if coaches come visit us, they're like, what is going on in here? Because it does. It looks a little different. It doesn't always look like bench, squat, dead, clean, and this is what we're going to do. We operate at a high tempo in the weight room. There's not a lot of time standing around. That stuff is really planned out. It's really specific on when we do it based on what we're doing. But there's also time when I'm like, hey, we are revving this up. You should not be standing still at any point right now, because I'm trying to get our readiness or just our preparedness, I guess, that GPP type idea. I'm trying to get that done. That isn't just time on feet, out on the field, doing random things. I'm like, man, we can train this quality if we just keep moving faster in certain parts of the training session.
Now, speaking of context on that, how does that change for you guys when it comes to like your middle school kids, right? Like, or those freshmen
Yeah.
that are still in development within the team? Like, do you train those two different groups differently than you do those varsity football guys?
Yeah, and that's big time, and that is a great show of context. Our middle school sessions are extremely slow.
Yes.
The large, I get like 30. It ends up being like 38 minutes with them, because you got to give them dress out time and all that, right? So it ends up being about 38 minutes, and I would probably say 25 to 30 of that is very slow, very intentional, very detailed, very specific, because they haven't, it's probably a better way to put it, but they haven't earned the right to train like that yet. Because I can't trust them movement wise. I can't trust them to do what they're supposed to do without it being on a call. And so that ends up happening is I'll like give them a little leash as they get older in the year. Like seventh graders don't have any mess up room. The seventh graders, and look, I don't like coaching like that either. I hate coaching on the whistle. And so those groups actually take more out of me, but I'm not willing to give up that development time to just say, hey, we're moving on. I'd rather it be super slow. And then as they get closer to moving to varsity, now I introduce that intensity difference and
I
that
think
speed
that
difference.
I think that's the perfect example of context within like what we do as coaches, because you have to be, as a coach, you have to be able to understand there is a developmental difference between these two parties, between a high school junior and senior and a seventh and eighth grader. And because there's a difference
Yeah.
cognitively and there's a difference physically in where they are from a preparedness perspective, the context of that shapes how we have to coach the two. Same as you. I hate coaching on a whistle, but we're about to enter a block where we are on a whistle. And I'm willing to give up the overall total volume of our sessions from a rep perspective in order to make sure that our training is right, simply because of the context of what those kids need. But that's the perfect example of what we're talking about when we're talking about the amount of time you have, the number of days you have, your facility, all of and who you work with. And in my opinion, the greatest determiner of context is the frequency you see your kids at. And if we can understand those pieces of context, then that's going to frame up, everything we do in a much better light.
Yeah. I think me and you talked about it a couple of years ago. You were exploring testing them on VBT like 2 or 3 times a week before their jumps. They almost went through like a jump rehab warm up into a PR jump or a vertical jump, like 3 days a week is what we were talking about. And I'm like, man, that sounds cool. But you see them 5 days a week for an hour and a half. And I'm like, I could never get that done inside of what we do here.
Yeah, and that was one of the things, because of the amount of time that I had and the frequency I had with them, I could do some really detailed stuff. And what that allowed me to do was really pick apart our programming with a fine tooth comb and be able to say, hey, this group of athletes needs something a little bit different. This group of athletes needs something a little bit more appropriate for what their developmental goals are. And then we could fit that training and where they're at right now to the position of what we're going to ask them to do. But yeah, because of the amount of time and the frequency that I saw them, and the resources that I had available to me, like that's what was able to determine that. And I think Monty Sparkman really latched onto that. To one of the things that we did was a body weight squat. So whatever your body weight was, as we're warming up, you're going to, at some point in your warm up, you're going to hit a set of 3 with your body weight, and you're going to record the velocity of that, the average velocity of that set of 3. And that allows us to track it. And as that number goes up, your vertical jump's going to go up too. So those things they correlate to each other. And so he's crushing it. He's continued that on. And there's a couple other iterations that we've talked through. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
an example of it. But because he has those guys for a certain amount of time, a certain frequency, he can do that. And we can't do that at middle school because our middle school kids are middle school kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And even to that, and it shows good programming can be everywhere, right? Good programming can be everywhere, but you have to understand the context. You can't just see something on social media or just talk to a coach and say, "Hey, I'm going to implement that today." It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to say, "I don't understand why he's doing that. I don't understand how he gets that done, but I saw it and I liked it and I'm putting it in tomorrow." That doesn't make any sense.
And this goes to like social media because everybody posts their highlights, like the highlights of their training, but
Yeah.
they rarely post the progressions that got them there. I was talking to Stikowski because he posted something the other day that was legit, and like, man, that's awesome. And I wish I could do it, but like, you have 240 football players. Like, that's why we won't put you on our roster, on our schedule, because you guys have like next
Yeah.
man up at like a 6 deep. So it's a little bit different, but he has, again, those contexts of what they can do. And he posted a drill and I'm like, I would love to implement that because that's a really great drill. But I didn't just go plug it in because our kids aren't there and I'm training middle schoolers.
No. Yeah. And I mean, at any level, we have to, and I think that's where people miss is there's so many people that are like, "Oh, no, that's dumb. Oh, that's dumb." No, it's not necessarily dumb. You just don't understand the context behind it or why they do it. I can do stuff now. We have a coach that came on staff last year and he played quarterback for us my first year here. And we were talking about it a few weeks ago, and he's like, "Coach, there is stuff that's so much different than when you first got here." And I said, "Well, one, ideally, I've become a better coach in 7 years. That's the hope. But two, I can do so much more because everybody is on the same page now." I said, "When I first got here with y'all, I had to establish who I was, how we were going to work. I had to prove to Coach Davis that he hired the right guy." And so, like, things were done differently and things were a lot more simple. And now, not that we're any more complex, but the programming can get more complex because one, I understand it more. And two, the kids know exactly what I'm looking for.
And it speaks to development as a whole. As a strength coach, I don't even mean physically as athletes anymore. I, as a coach, should be developing. And I don't mean like my program
Mhm.
shouldn't change just for the sake of change. But when we're genuinely evaluating like our developmental program and our processes over the course of like 3 and 5 years, while some of the frameworks and exercises and some of the things that I
Mhm.
emphasize that I really value have stayed the same, but how we go about those things have changed. Like, I still think a front squat is better than a back squat for the vast majority of athletes because of what it develops. But how we go about getting there has changed. How we go about implementing it and
Mhm.
how we train it has changed. And even how I view it as a
Yeah.
tool to leverage certain performance aspects. So, us as coaches,
Mhm.
when we combine context with our development, when those alumni come back and they see that stuff, you're like, crap, yeah, this has changed. Like,
Yeah.
no doubt it's
Mhm.
supposed to. Like, our ways of thinking should change
Yeah.
in light of our experiences and in
Mhm.
light of new information. Like, that's what this whole process is as a coach. If I get to year 30 as a coach and I'm still doing what I'm doing now at year 8, like,
Yeah. Yep.
I failed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the issue when people just, Google search and they're like Husker Power program. Husker Power, don't get me wrong, was great and is great. You could probably run it today and have a ton of success, to be honest.
My knees hurt thinking about it.
But but you're also not Coach Epley freaking coaching it,
Yeah.
Like it's not you're not in the room. You have no idea the context he had, and you probably don't have these just hoss tanks that you're coaching either. You're trying to do it with some like ninth grade kid and run Husker Power and like, good luck, go get it.
I'll never forget. I had a coach ask me one time what my thoughts were on like a Smolov bench. I was like, man,
Yeah, love
I
that.
guess it kind of depends on what your goals are. Like, yeah, you might increase your bench a little bit, but at the end of the day, like your shoulders are going to be feeling terrible, or your elbows, and he's like, no,
Yeah,
not me. I meant for our kids. I'm like, yeah, we're going to hold off on that.
It just doesn't, it is always, and I think it's something that we should get better at as coaches. It's probably on any level, but understanding the context. Even strength coaches talking to sport coaches, like we need to understand the context they're coming from. Context is key in freaking everything. And if we're not operating on the same lens or can see why somebody's doing what they're doing, it we're missing it somewhere. You know, we're missing this idea of how to get kids better.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's all about evaluating what a group or an individual needs in order to get there. And I think athletes,
Mhm.
even because of how prevalent social media is, like I get asked all the time my thoughts on like this Instagram workout or this TikTok workout.
Yeah.
And now even like
Yeah.
a Chat GPT workout. And I'm like, dude, you guys got to understand, like, these people don't know you. These people aren't training for football, or these
Yeah.
people aren't training for like whatever you're training at. And they're not 14 years old and they're eating all of these things and you don't know what they're taking.
Taking
Like,
all the things. Yeah.
aspects, yeah, that go into it. It's like, yeah, it might be a cool workout and like you might feel good, but like let's not base all of our development on what we saw on TikTok.
No, and it like misses, right? Because there's nothing happening, you know, even it's why I don't necessarily love like remote training.
Mm.
Because even in the style that somebody trains, you know, somebody I've tried it once, like with a remote client, and I was just like, "Hey, I just can't," because you know they're working out at a public gym, and then they're like, "Oh, I couldn't do this today. I couldn't do this today. I couldn't do this today," and I'm like, "This is a ton to try to modify in the moment," and we end up doing something that realistically isn't even programmed.
Mm.
It's just we modify so much that the training isn't even the same as what I was looking for.
Yeah. And there's a lot of remote coaches that can program or can write out a program for development. If you as an athlete say like, hey, I want to work on I need to get bigger, I need to get faster and stronger, they can write out a program, but at the end of the day, like they're not there to push you on it. They're not there to coach you on it. They're not there to learn you as an
Mhm.
individual. And I think there's so much value in that for us as coaches to learn the personality types that of people
Yeah.
that are in our room, like the context
Mhm.
of within those relationships. Like I know athletes that I can drive really, really, really hard and I can coach them like they're in
Yeah.
college from the perspective of, hey, you told me
Mhm.
your goal is to play college football and you're capable of
Mhm.
doing that. So I'm going to push you in a way that drives you toward that goal. And there's other kids that if I train them
Mhm.
the exact same way, like they'd want to quit next week.
Yeah, and it's the kid to kid too, and it's the coach to coach. How do you communicate with each coach? How do you communicate with each kid? And we have to understand how those different buttons work. I'm not a super relational guy. You know, Strengths Finder, the the test would be like, "Hey, he sucks at relationships." But NCT, like my wife, she always wonders, she's like, "How does this happen?" And I'm like, "It takes me a ton of work, but I learn what each kid needs." And like you were saying, we got kids on our team that if I yelled at them, they would shut down. I would never get anything out of them. Effort would be crap the rest of the time they're in our program. But then I also have kids that I can look at, you know, and figuratively like grab them by the nape of the neck and be like, "Hey, I need you to freaking go." And they respond to that challenge well. You know, but there, like I said, there's other kids that you do that to, and you're going to be shut down, or you're never going to get anything out of them.
Yeah, so it's all about, I mean, it's all about those relationships, and Ashley will tell you too,
Yep.
like, and you know, because you've stayed at the house, like we're both like
Hmm.
two of the most sarcastic people you're ever gonna meet in your life. And like we talked when we talk to each other, like you're like, do these people like each other?
Hmm.
But like we are meant for each other simply because like she'll call me
Hmm.
out on everything, like down to the most minute
Yep.
stuff. So like and it's everywhere. And
Hmm.
like that context, it goes into relationships, not only in coaching, not only in like peer to peer, coach to coach, but like every relationship we have, there's context within a relationship. There's context
Hmm.
within like the role. Like there's things that I'll joke around with to other coaches, but like you can't say to your boss. Why? Because they're your boss. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. So like societal norms and regulations like go into the context of
Hmm.
our relationships with other people.
Hmm.
It's your
Hmm.
favorite thing. It's
And so,
nuanced.
like, it's nuanced, man. Everything's nuanced. You got to be nuanced. It's you don't have to explain yourself if you say it's nuanced.
It's
So
nuanced.
the we have to, I think on that vein, right, is like, it's all, we've said it 500 times, but everything's contextual here. And so when people, let's get the social media arguments going between coaches and try to, and I'm about it and I'm about BS being called out. But sometimes the people are arguing for things that like, hey, this doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, it doesn't make sense for you and like the way you think about training, but the way I think about training and the way I train my kids, it makes sense. And as long, I don't know how you feel, but as long as I can back it up scientifically. Now, if you ask me something and I'm just like, yeah, seem good, that's a problem. Like, and as long as it makes sense, right? If I'm training soccer players and I'm like, yeah, we kind of kicked the ball around a little bit. We did a couple goblet squats and I said, see y'all, that doesn't make sense. But if training is sound and we're getting done the demands of the game, I don't really care like what other coaches think of, because you're not in house, you're not with me, you don't know what the idea, the team, anything like that.
Yeah, and so much of it really does go to that relational aspect. And like you mentioned before, grabbing stuff off social media or even entire thought processes off social media and
Hmm.
implementing an entire system off of social media without critical thinking of what aspects are pros and cons based off who we are as a team, what we need our physical drivers to be, are
Hmm.
really important pieces that I think when we look at social media as a whole, a lot of coaches, I mean, a lot of the public really lack. And it took me a long time on social media to understand
Uh,
I don't have to wholesale fire sale into one way of thinking, or I don't even have to accept every tenet of somebody's philosophy just for me to say like, hey,
yeah.
that's good. That piece of this training is good, or it's even applicable within this phase of our yearly training
Hmm.
cycle. So I think the
Hmm.
critical thinking portion of what we need in training at certain times of the year versus a wholesale like purchase of one way of thinking, those are drastic conversations that are really missing in a lot of those social media arguments that you'll see now.
Yeah. And you said something, the critical thinking part is key. Like wholesaling into something that you don't understand why it was done in the first place isn't gonna, it's not gonna move a needle for you. It's not gonna win games. It's not gonna get your kids any better. But that critical thinking aspect of being like, hey, that method might not be the problem, right? The method might not be the issue, is the understanding of the thought process that led to this idea.
And the worst part of it can be is you can wholeheartedly adopt every part of a philosophy, but then there might be one piece that's missing and you never quite get over that hump in order to
Hmm.
maximize that fully. So you might miss out on really good accomplishments simply because of the fact that you're glued to this methodology and you're not incorporating something else that is a context or a piece of information
Hmm.
that your population really needs in order to get them over that hump.
Yeah, and that's why it's awesome working on a staff, right? That because they different people latch on to different cues. And so this coach might understand what you're trying to say, but the athlete doesn't. But this coach cues it up differently to the athlete, and it clicks all of a sudden. You're like, I've been telling you the same thing for 8 weeks, but it didn't make any sense because I didn't say it in that certain way.
Yeah.
It's, we have to understand how to communicate with each other, and it's not always just bad. It's just a difference. I think I've talked with Brenton about this. I mean, pretty much everybody is like, I like to think I surround myself with good coaches and smart people and people that I think are really, really good. But I can't go into y'all's weight room and coach your session the way you would, and vice versa, right? Like really good coaches can come in our weight room and they can't coach the session the way I could because they didn't write it and they don't understand. They don't they didn't see the erasing the whiteboard 15 times to get it where you wanted to because it like made sense.
And they don't know that one kid in rack 3 that can say one thing and throw the entire session off because now nobody's focused.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of
Yes.
like early on in my career, I had our head football coach, the first football coach I worked for, came to me. He goes, "Hey, what are your thoughts on XYZ when it comes to like this specific philosophy? Or what are actually it was, what are your thoughts on this philosophy as a whole?" And I'm like, Oh, it's good because I didn't really know too much about it. Like I knew it from like an outside looking in perspective. I was like, oh, it's
Mhm.
good. Well, he took that as oh, let's do that all the time and let's let that be our entire thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and then as we implemented, I just kind of went along with it because I'm like, well, he's a coach. And
Mhm.
then as I learned more and more, I'm like, hang on, I think there's some pieces missing to this that we really need. So let's work through that. So even just being
Yeah.
careful with like as strength coaches, when people come to us as the expert in how to shape
Mhm.
their team, like let's be careful of I like these aspects of that training. I'm not fully
Mhm.
endorsing the entire philosophy. There's a big difference there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like context free advice typically moves pretty quick. It'll make the rounds because typically it shows like something different,
Go
but
from this
then
bench
it
to this bench
executes
in
and works.
6 weeks.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well that doesn't. Yeah, it just doesn't ever pan out for anybody. If we don't, I don't know how many times it can be a dead horse, but it doesn't make sense to just
Mhm.
fully adopt, especially in what we do. And then there's differences, right? Being in the Southeast, there's big differences compared to being up north. Scheduling, population, the metros, the idea behind it. It's not saying one's better than the other. Like I'm not getting into the SEC and Big Ten debate, but the it's a different mentality, and you've lived in both. I haven't. I try to stay this way, but you've seen it on both ends, and so it's just even understanding that and the type of the kid and the type of coaches and the pressure behind it. All of that plays a part.
Yeah, and like you said, uh, having coached in Ohio and then coached in Georgia, Ohio has really good football, but it's a very different
Hmm.
football than what Georgia has,
Yeah.
simply because like
Hmm.
we have spring football, we have summer all year, we have padded camp, we have all of these things that go into how we can train and what we can do. And even Texas, you're only allowed a certain number of hours
Hmm.
each week in the summertime with them. And we are
Hmm.
way over that in
Yeah.
Georgia simply because we can. So like the hours and how much time and all of these things that go into it, it doesn't make one way better than another way. And and saying that is okay. And we have to get to a point as coaches where we can say things that seem like they disagree with a system, but understand that no, that doesn't mean that I disagree with the system. I disagree that it's the right system for everybody to use across all contexts and applications of that system. There are certain ways and certain things that we can do and be successful with here in Georgia at a soon to be 5A school that if you implement it at a single A school or a 7A school wouldn't be successful simply because of the people that we have, the
Hmm.
number of two-way players we've got, the teams that we play, the talent we have, the time we have. So being as a coach, we have to be able to have those skills and those ability to adapt those things. And as a community, when it comes to social media, we have to understand the difference between I'm not disagreeing with that your philosophy works for what you're saying it does, and it builds the qualities that you're saying it does, but that doesn't mean it's the proper application for everybody.
Bingo. That seems like a very good, like, ribbon on the present, put the bow on it, whatever you want to call it. But to close it out, I want us to kind of attack two different things I had written down throughout the episode. So we want this to be a resource, right? And so if you were a coach, or if a coach were to ask you a question about what should I understand before applying a method? Like, what's the question I need to be able to answer before implementing something into my program? What would that be?
I would say, what's the goal of that philosophy or that method of training? What is the one thing or the best thing that is trying to improve or trying to enhance? And is that exactly what I need at this moment in time?
Yeah. And I think that's money. And so, but not to, not to repeat what you said, I think it would be, can you coach it? Can you coach what you're
Yes.
trying to implement? Do you understand it deeply enough to be able to say, I can coach this, I can implement this really well to the level you want it to be done at? You can't blame the kids if you're implementing something new and you can't coach it. Like, can I coach what this new method is trying to put out there? And then second, the last question I want to present to you is the cost of ignoring context. What is the
Mm.
cost as a coach to ignoring context in wherever you want to take the context. I don't care if it's training. I don't care if it's on social media, like whatever that is, like, but the cost of ignoring it in just our brains and like how we present information.
I would say the cost of ignoring context can be, depending on the situation, it can be minimal and it can be grave all at the same time. I can come in and implement a system and be like, my way, only my way. These kids will adapt to what I do. And I might be right. And it might drive things, it might improve culture. But then again, I might come in and do it and be that way and be hard headed, where, like I said earlier, I'm going to fit a square peg in a round hole, and we're just going to sit there and we're going to hammer that home. And then I'm going to look like to everybody else around that I'm stubborn, that I'm not willing to listen. I'm not willing to grow. I'm not willing to consider the thoughts and feelings of other people. I'm not willing to consider the community. So it could work really, really well, and it could be game changing, or it could be at the same time the thing that signs my slip to be fired.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like on top of that, it's ignoring context, I think, can make you look really ignorant. If we take the bad part of it, you ignore context on who you're training, on the kids you have, on the coaching style you have, on the coaching staff that's helping you, what that team's culture is. It can make you look really ignorant if here at MRA, right? Like, I have great kids, but this environment is very different than the environment I grew up in. The Lovejoy is very, very different than Madison, Mississippi. And so we have
Your
to,
hood's starting to
those
show
two
a little
things
bit.
operate really differently. Yeah, it just operates a
Hood
little
George,
a
let's
little
go.
differently than it changes. And I coach the way here because I can get through to my kids. I know how to get through to them. But if I was in a different situation, not that anything else changes, but if I tried to operate how I operate here and can talk to these kids here, I can look really ignorant if I go somewhere else and the community is completely different.
But
So I think
when you
that's
do
one of
that,
the things
though,
we can miss.
when you do that, it doesn't make you a disingenuous person. It doesn't mean that you're not being true to who you are. It just makes you
Mm-mm.
intelligent enough to know that I'm going to be me. I'm going to be who I am and how I coach,
Yeah.
but I need to change these few things to be effective. That makes you intelligent. That makes it
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still operating in like who I am. It's still operating in the values I carry myself in, but it's not, I can talk to kids a different way depending on where I am to try to get, and it happens every day in our individual weight rooms now. That's a broad stroke, but there's kids, I can't talk to seniors or freshmen the way I talk to seniors. I don't have to talk to seniors the way I talk to freshmen, because we have a better relationship built up. We can go that way. It's just a different, like you said, it's not disingenuous. It's just being smart enough to not be an idiot.
I had to stop myself today. We were having some issues with a couple kids, and there were a few seventh graders that just like they would not listen to anything that I was doing, and I literally had to I was mid sentence and I had to bite my mouth, like bite my lip and walk away, because on the tip of my tongue was like, I really hope that this clicks for you between now and your freshman year, and you end up quitting, so I don't have to deal with you as a high schooler. And I was like, I can't say that to them because they don't know that I don't actually mean it.
Mm-mm.
I just want them to wake up and stop being idiots.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we all have that, right? And it's understanding like when we can say that. Now you're a junior linebacker that's a stud and is acting like a turd one day. It's like, yeah, you're about to catch all of this right now.
That's right.
But hey, Dan, thanks for ranting with me again. Hopefully this thing keeps building. Thank you for listening. We're still trying to figure out a schedule on how we're going to release things, how often we're going to release. Right now, we're just recording and posting and trying to get more than 21 streams this week. So
I was just about to say our goal this week's
for
22.
people, 22 is the goal. So if you have coaches to share this with that hasn't gotten to yet, we're on everything. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Go ahead, share it to them. We appreciate y'all listening, and tune in next time for episode 3 on a undetermined topic.